The phone was vibrating against my ear so violently I thought it might crack. Mom's voice cut through the static like a serrated knife, each word sharper than the last. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. $50,000, Madison. That's all I'm asking for. After everything I've done for you, everything I've sacrificed, this is how you repay me? I sat in my cramped studio apartment, staring at the stack of overdue bills on my coffee table. The rent notice was bright yellow, impossible to ignore. My savings account had exactly $847 in it. $50,000 might as well have been $50 million. Mom, I don't have that kind of money. You know I don't. I'm barely keeping my head above water as it is. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Then came the words that would haunt me for months. You selfish, ungrateful brat. After 26 years of putting you first, this is what I get? You're dead to me, Madison. Dead. Don't ever call me again. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, my hand trembling. The dial tone hummed in my ear like a funeral dirge. Outside my window, Portland's November rain drummed against the glass, each drop echoing the finality of what had just happened. My mother had just disowned me over money I didn't have. The apartment felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in. I'd moved to Oregon 3 years ago for a fresh start, leaving behind the suffocating atmosphere of my childhood home in Phoenix. Now that past had reached across 2 states to destroy the fragile peace I'd built. My phone buzzed, a text from my older brother Tyler. Mom told me what happened. You made your choice. Another buzz, my sister Brooke. Really disappointed in you, Maddie. Family comes first. I turned the phone face down and buried my head in my hands. In less than 5 minutes, I'd lost my entire family. The next morning brought a new catastrophe. I was mixing coffee in the tiny kitchenette when someone pounded on my door. Not knocked, pounded, like they meant business. Miss Harper? Madison Harper? The voice was official, clipped. I opened the door to find a man in his 50s wearing a rumpled suit and holding a clipboard. Behind him stood a woman with dead eyes and perfectly applied lipstick. I'm Detective Morrison, Portland Police. This is Linda Chen from Social Services. We need to talk to you about your nephew. My stomach dropped. Connor? What about Connor? Your sister-in-law was arrested last night on drug charges. Your brother is unavailable. The boy needs immediate placement with family. The world tilted sideways. Tyler and his wife Sarah had been struggling for years, but I never thought it would come to this. Connor was only 8 years old. I don't understand. Where's Tyler? Detective Morrison consulted his notes. Currently incarcerated on related charges. Look, Miss Harper, we've contacted other family members. Your mother declined to take custody. She said to call you. Of course she did. Even after cutting me off, Mom was still manipulating the situation. She knew I couldn't say no to Connor, knew I'd take him in, despite having no resources to care for a child. Can I see him? Linda Chen stepped forward. He's in the car, but I need to be clear about what you're agreeing to. This isn't temporary babysitting. This is full custody until his parents can prove they're fit to care for him again. Do you have stable housing, income, any experience with children? I looked over her shoulder at the police cruiser. Through the back window, I could see a small face pressed against the glass. Connor's dark hair was messy, his Spider-Man t-shirt wrinkled. He looked lost. I'll figure it out, I said. The paperwork took 2 hours. By the time they left, Connor was sitting on my couch clutching a garbage bag full of his belongings. He hadn't said a word since they brought him in. Hey, buddy, I said, sitting down next to him. Are you hungry? He shrugged. I opened the garbage bag and helped him unpack. 3 changes of clothes, a worn teddy bear, some toy cars, and a school notebook covered in his careful 3rd-grade handwriting. That was it. 8 years of life reduced to what fit in a trash bag. Connor, I know this is scary, but you're safe here, okay? We'll figure everything out together. He finally looked at me with Tyler's eyes. Mom said I might have to go to foster care. Not while I'm here. Your family. That night, I gave him my bed and slept on the couch. I lay awake calculating impossible math. My rent was $1,200 a month. My job at the nonprofit paid barely enough to cover my own expenses. Now I had to feed, clothe, and care for a traumatized child. I thought about calling Mom, begging her to help with Connor, if not with me. But her words echoed in my mind. "You're dead to me." She'd made her position clear. The next few days blurred together. I enrolled Connor in the elementary school 6 blocks away, explaining his situation to a kind principal who promised to have the counselor check on him. I researched food assistance programs and Medicaid applications. I sold my laptop, my bike, and the few pieces of jewelry I owned. Connor barely spoke. He ate mechanically, did his homework without complaint, and went to bed early. Sometimes I'd catch him staring out the window with an expression far too old for his face. On Friday afternoon, I came home from work to find him sitting on the floor playing with his toy cars. For the first time since he'd arrived, he looked like a kid. "How was school today?" "Okay. Mrs. Peterson says I'm good at math." "That's awesome. You get that from your dad." His face clouded over. "When is Dad coming back?" I sat down next to him, choosing my words carefully. "I don't know, sweetie, but whatever happens, you've got me." That night, I gave him my bed and slept on the couch. I lay awake calculating impossible math. My rent was $1,200 a month. My job at the nonprofit paid barely enough to cover my own expenses. Now I had to feed, clothe, and care for a traumatized child. I thought about calling Mom, begging her to help with Connor, if not with me. But her words echoed in my mind. "You're dead to me." She'd made her position clear. The next few days blurred together. I enrolled Connor in the elementary school 6 blocks away, explaining his situation to a kind principal who promised to have the counselor check on him. I researched food assistance programs and Medicaid applications. I sold my laptop, my bike, and the few pieces of jewelry I owned. Connor barely spoke. He ate mechanically, did his homework without complaint, and went to bed early. Sometimes I'd catch him staring out the window with an expression far too old for his face. On Friday afternoon, I came home from work to find him sitting on the floor playing with his toy cars. For the first time since he'd arrived, he looked like a kid. "How was school today?" "Okay. Mrs. Peterson says I'm good at math." "That's awesome. You get that from your dad." His face clouded over. "When is Dad coming back?" I sat down next to him, choosing my words carefully. "I don't know, sweetie, but whatever happens, you've got me." That weekend, disaster struck again. I was making pancakes when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Madison Harper?" "Yes. This is Valley Medical Center. We have your mother here. She's listed you as her emergency contact." My blood froze. What happened? "She collapsed at home. Possible heart attack. She's stable now, but she's asking for you." I hung up and stared at Connor, who was watching cartoons in his pajamas. Mom was in the hospital. The same woman who'd called me dead to her was asking for me now. I called my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd been checking on Connor when I worked late. Within an hour, I was driving toward Phoenix, my hands white-knuckling the steering wheel. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and despair. I found Mom in the cardiac unit, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Tubes snaked from her arms, and a monitor beeped steadily beside her bed. "Madison," she whispered when she saw me. "You came." "Of course I came." Her eyes filled with tears. "I thought, after what I said—" "Don't. Just focus on getting better." But she grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "I need to tell you something. About the money. About why I needed it." My chest tightened. "Mom, rest. We can talk later." "No, listen to me." Her voice was urgent now. "It wasn't for me. It was for Tyler. For his legal fees. I didn't want you to know how bad things had gotten." The room spun. "What?" "He owes money to dangerous people, Madison. The drugs, the arrests, it's all connected. They said they'd hurt Connor if Tyler didn't pay up. I was trying to protect all of you." I sank into the chair beside her bed. Everything I'd believed about the last week crumbled. Mom hadn't been greedy or manipulative. She'd been desperate to save her family. "Why didn't you just tell me?" "Because I knew you'd try to help, and you don't have that kind of money either. I thought maybe it was your grandfather's estate. She trailed off, coughing. Grandpa Joe's estate? Mom, that was settled years ago. She shook her head weakly. No, honey. His lawyer has been trying to reach you. Something about a delayed inheritance. I kept meaning to tell you, but then everything fell apart. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The room tilted. What inheritance? But before she could answer, alarms started blaring. Nurses rushed in, pushing me aside as they worked to stabilize her. I stood in the hallway, watching through the glass door as they fought to save the woman who'd raised me, protected me, and tried to carry impossible burdens alone. Hours later, when she was stable again, I sat in the hospital cafeteria with my phone in my hands. I'd missed 17 calls from a number I didn't recognize. The voicemails were all from the same person, Harold Whitman, attorney at law. Miss Harper, this is regarding your grandfather Joseph Brennan's estate. There's been a significant development that requires your immediate attention. Please call me as soon as possible. My grandfather had died when I was 16. He'd been a quiet man who worked as a janitor at the local high school. I'd loved him dearly, but I never imagined he had anything to leave behind. I dialed the number with shaking fingers. Mr. Whitman, this is Madison Harper. You've been trying to reach me? Miss Harper, thank goodness. I've been attempting to contact you for months. Your grandfather's estate has finally been fully processed, and there are some assets that need to be transferred to you immediately. I don't understand. What assets? Your grandfather owned property that we've recently sold. Additionally, there were some investments that have matured. Miss Harper, you've inherited approximately $275,000. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the cafeteria table. Around me, people continued eating and talking as if the world hadn't just shifted on its axis. $275,000. I thought about Connor sleeping in my bed, about Mom lying upstairs fighting for her life, about Tyler sitting in a jail cell. I thought about the $50,000 that had cost me my family and the impossible choice that had led me here. And for the first time in a week, I started to cry. Not from sadness or fear, but from something I'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. The antiseptic smell of the hospital followed me home, clinging to my clothes like a reminder of how quickly everything could change. Connor was asleep when I got back to Portland, curled up on the couch with Mrs. Rodriguez, watching her telenovelas at low volume. How is she? Mrs. Rodriguez whispered, gathering her knitting. Stable. Thank you for staying with him. After she left, I sat in the dark living room watching Connor sleep. His face was peaceful for once, free from the worry lines that had appeared since his world collapsed. I couldn't stop thinking about what Mom had told me about Grandpa Joe's inheritance. $275,000. It felt surreal, like winning a lottery I'd never entered. But sitting there in the quiet, memories of my grandfather came flooding back. Stories I hadn't thought about in years suddenly felt important, like puzzle pieces I'd never known were missing. Grandpa Joe had lived in the same small house in Tucson his entire adult life. After Grandma Rose died when I was 12, he'd seemed to shrink into himself. Mom worried about him constantly, driving the 4 hours from Phoenix every other weekend to check on him. But he always insisted he was fine, that he didn't need anything. I remembered being 16, standing in his tiny kitchen after the funeral. The house had felt enormous and empty without his quiet presence. Mom and Tyler had gone through his belongings methodically, donating clothes to Goodwill, boxing up photographs, deciding what to keep and what to let go. He didn't have much, Mom had said, holding up his old watch, but he was rich in the ways that mattered. That's what we'd all believed. Grandpa Joe had worked as a janitor at Desert View High School for 37 years. He'd never owned a car newer than 10 years old, never took vacations, never seemed to spend money on anything beyond the necessities. We'd assumed his life insurance barely covered the funeral costs. But now I wondered what we'd missed. What had we not known about the man who'd taught me to play chess on Sunday afternoons, who'd slipped me $5 bills when Mom wasn't looking, who'd listened to my teenage problems with the patience of someone who understood that small hurts could feel enormous? I pulled out my laptop and started searching for information about Harold Whitman, the lawyer who'd been trying to reach me. His website showed a respectable practice in Tucson, specializing in estate planning and real estate. Nothing flashy, nothing that suggested he dealt with anything beyond ordinary people's ordinary affairs. The next morning, I called him back. "Mr. Whitman, this is Madison Harper. I'm sorry I haven't returned your call sooner. My family has been dealing with some emergencies." "Of course, Miss Harper, I understand. These things can be overwhelming. Would it be possible for you to come to Tucson? There are documents you need to sign, and I think it would be beneficial to discuss your grandfather's estate in person." "Can you tell me more over the phone? I have my nephew staying with me, and I can't really travel right now." There was a pause. "Miss Harper, your grandfather owned several properties that we weren't aware of until recently. The estate has been more complex than we initially anticipated. I really do think an in-person meeting would be best." Several properties? I tried to reconcile this with the image of my grandfather in his worn cardigan, watering his single tomato plant in the backyard. That afternoon, while Connor was at school, I drove to the library and used their computers to research public records in Tucson. What I found made my hands shake. Joseph Brennan had owned not just his small house on Maple Street, but 3 other properties scattered around the city. A duplex near the university that had been renting to students for decades. A small commercial building downtown that housed a vintage bookstore and a coffee shop. And a vacant lot in what was now a highly desirable neighborhood. How had we not known? How had a man who'd seemed to live paycheck to paycheck accumulate a real estate portfolio worth hundreds of thousands of dollars? I printed everything I could find and drove home in a daze. Connor was sitting at the kitchen table working on homework when I walked in. "Aunt Madison, are you okay? You look weird." I sat down across from him, spreading the papers between us. "Connor, what do you remember about Great-Grandpa Joe?" He wrinkled his nose, thinking. "He made really good grilled cheese, and he had that old dog, Buster. Why?" "Just wondering." I looked at the property records again. "Did your dad ever talk about him? About money or anything like that?" Connor shrugged. "Dad always said rich people were jerks. He said we were better off poor because it made us tougher." The irony wasn't lost on me. Tyler had spent years resenting people with money, never knowing that his own grandfather had quietly built a small fortune, had been saving it, maybe, for exactly this kind of emergency. That evening, I called Mom's hospital room. "How are you feeling?" "Better. The doctor says I can go home tomorrow." Her voice was still weak, but stronger than yesterday. "Madison, about the inheritance?" "Mom, did you know about the properties?" A long silence. I suspected something. In his last years, he started asking strange questions about college funds for you kids, about whether Tyler was getting the help he needed. I thought it was just a worry, but now you think he was planning something? Your grandfather loved his family more than anything. After your grandmother died, I think he felt like he'd failed somehow, like he hadn't provided enough. Maybe this was his way of making up for it. I thought about Tyler in jail, about Sarah struggling with addiction, about Connor's garbage bag of belongings. Had Grandpa Joe somehow known this day would come? "There's something else," Mom continued. "After he died, I found a letter in his desk. I never opened it. It has your name on it." My heart stopped. "Where is it?" "In my jewelry box, top drawer of my dresser. Madison, I should have given it to you years ago. I didn't want to upset you so soon after losing him." The next day, I arranged for Connor to stay with Mrs. Rodriguez again and drove to Phoenix. Mom was being discharged when I arrived, looking fragile but determined. We drove to her house in silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. The house felt different somehow, smaller and sadder, weighed down by all the things we hadn't said to each other. I helped Mom settle into her recliner, then went to her bedroom to find the letter. It was exactly where she'd said it would be, in a white envelope yellowed with age. My name was written on the front in Grandpa Joe's careful handwriting, for Madison Rose Harper. My middle name was Rose, after Grandma. He was the only one who ever used it. I sat on Mom's bed and opened the envelope with trembling fingers. "My dear Madison Rose," the letter began. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're probably confused about some things. I need you to understand that everything I did for love. The letter went on to explain how he'd started buying properties in the 1980s, using his janitor's salary to make small down payments and renting them out to cover the mortgages. He'd lived simply, reinvesting every dollar of profit back into more real estate. I never told your mother or Tyler because I knew they'd worry about the responsibilities. But you, Madison, you've always been different. You think before you act. You consider consequences. You put others before yourself. That's why I'm trusting you with this. The letter detailed each property, explaining the tenants and the management company he'd used. It also contained something I hadn't expected: specific instructions for helping Tyler get clean and keeping the family together. Your brother is lost right now, but he's not beyond saving. This money isn't just for you, sweetheart. It's for all of you. Use it wisely. Help where you can, but don't let anyone take advantage of your kind heart. The final paragraph made me cry. I know you think you're not strong enough for what's coming, but you are. You're stronger than you know, braver than you feel, and more loved than you can imagine. Your grandmother and I will be watching over you, proud of the woman you've become. Take care of our family, Madison Rose. You're the one I trust to keep us all together. I sat there holding the letter, understanding for the first time that my grandfather's quiet life had been anything but ordinary. He'd been a man with a plan, preparing for emergencies he hoped would never come, but knew probably would. When I walked back to the living room, Mom was waiting with red-rimmed eyes. What did it say? I handed her the letter and watched her face change as she read. When she finished, she looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. He chose you, she whispered. Out of all of us, he chose you to carry this responsibility. Mom, I'm not ready for this. I don't know how to manage properties or help Tyler or take care of Connor. I'm barely managing my own life. She reached for my hand, squeezing it with surprising strength. That's exactly why he chose you, sweetheart, because you know you're not ready. People who think they have all the answers usually don't, but people who ask the right questions, they're the ones who figure things out. That night, I lay in my childhood bed staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, I would meet with Harold Whitman and officially inherit my grandfather's legacy. I would become responsible for properties, tenants, and more money than I'd ever imagined having. But more than that, I would become the person Grandpa Joe believed I could be. The one who kept the family together. The one who helped Tyler find his way back. The one who gave Connor the stable childhood he deserved. It was terrifying, overwhelming, and completely beyond anything I'd ever thought possible. It was also exactly what I was going to do. Harold Whitman's office was nothing like I'd expected. Instead of mahogany and leather, it was filled with plants and family photos, with a coffee machine that gurgled cheerfully in the corner. The lawyer himself was a soft-spoken man in his 60s who offered me homemade cookies his wife had baked. Your grandfather was a remarkable man, he said, settling behind his desk with a thick file. In 40 years of practice, I've never had a client quite like him. I sat across from him, still trying to process everything I'd learned. How long did you work with him? 15 years. He came to me when he bought his second property, said he needed someone to help him do things properly, legally. He was very concerned about protecting his family's future. Mr. Whitman opened the file and pulled out a stack of documents. Miss Harper, I need to walk you through exactly what you're inheriting. It's substantial, but it also comes with responsibilities. The next hour felt like drinking from a fire hose. Property deeds, tenant agreements, tax records, bank statements. My grandfather hadn't just bought real estate. He'd built a carefully managed business. Each property had detailed maintenance logs, tenant screening records, and financial projections. The duplex near the university has been fully rented for 8 years, Mr. Whitman explained. Good tenants, graduate students mostly. The commercial building downtown generates steady income from the bookstore and coffee shop. Both have long-term leases. I stared at the rental income statements. Even after expenses, the properties generated over $4,000 a month in profit, more than I made at my nonprofit job. This doesn't make sense, I said finally. How did no one in my family know about this? Mr. Whitman smiled gently. Your grandfather was very deliberate about his privacy. He used a property management company to handle day-to-day operations. He filed his taxes through a different accountant than your mother used. He wanted to build this legacy without creating family expectations or conflicts. But why keep it secret? He was worried about how sudden wealth might affect your family dynamics. He'd seen other families torn apart by inheritance disputes. This way, he could observe everyone's character over time and make informed decisions about who should inherit what. The weight of that hit me. Grandpa Joe had been watching us all, evaluating our choices, our values, our ability to handle responsibility. And somehow, I'd passed a test I didn't even know I was taking. There's one more thing, Mr. Whitman said, pulling out a sealed envelope. He left specific instructions about your brother Tyler. Inside was another letter in Grandpa Joe's handwriting, along with a cashier's check for $50,000. Madison, the letter read, I know Tyler is struggling. Addiction runs in families, and I failed to get your grandmother the help she needed before it was too late. Don't let my mistakes become his tragedy. This money is for treatment, not bail, not lawyers, not debts to dangerous people. Professional treatment only. If he refuses, keep the money until he's ready. Sometimes people need to hit bottom before they can climb back up. I stared at the check, the exact amount Mom had asked me for, the amount that had cost me my family. 2 days later, I was back in Portland with a briefcase full of documents and a head spinning with possibilities. Connor was at school, so I had the apartment to myself to process everything. I spread the papers across my coffee table and tried to make sense of my new reality. I was no longer just Madison Harper, struggling nonprofit worker. I was now a property owner, a business operator, someone responsible for tenants' homes and livelihoods. The thought was terrifying. My phone rang. Mom, how did it go with the lawyer? It's real, Mom, all of it. The properties, the money, everything Grandpa Joe wrote in his letter. And Tyler? I told her about the cashier's check, about the specific instructions for treatment. There was a long silence. $50,000 for rehab, she said finally. The same amount I asked you for. He knew, didn't he? Somehow he knew this would happen. Your grandfather always saw things the rest of us missed. That's probably how he built all this in the first place. That afternoon, I called the rehab facility that Detective Morrison had mentioned when Connor was placed with me. Pacific Recovery Center had a 90-day residential program with a good success rate. The intake coordinator was encouraging but realistic. Treatment only works if the person wants to get clean, she said. Has your brother expressed interest in recovery? I honestly didn't know. Tyler and I hadn't had a real conversation in years. Our relationship had been reduced to awkward small talk at family gatherings and obligatory holiday texts. Can I visit him to discuss options? Family visits can be arranged through the jail system, but be prepared. People in his situation are often angry, defensive, or manipulative. Don't let him guilt you into anything you're not comfortable with. The next week, I drove to the county detention center where Tyler was being held. The building was gray concrete and razor wire, designed to intimidate. I sat in the waiting room for an hour, watching other families go through the same ritual of hope and heartbreak. When Tyler finally appeared behind the plexiglass barrier, I barely recognized him. He'd lost weight, his face was gaunt, and his eyes held a desperate edge I'd never seen before. Madison, he said, picking up the phone, I can't believe you're here. Hi, Tyler. I didn't know where to start. How are you holding up? He laughed bitterly. What do you think? I'm in jail, my wife's in rehab, and my kid is living with his aunt who can barely take care of herself? Everything's fantastic. The old Tyler would have hurt my feelings with that comment. But sitting there, looking at my broken brother, I felt something different. Not anger, but sadness. And maybe, for the first time, clarity. Tyler, I need to tell you something about Grandpa Joe. I explained everything, the inheritance, the properties, the letter with his name on it.
I watched his expression change from skepticism to disbelief to something that might have been hope. He left money for my treatment? For professional treatment, 90 days residential program, but only if you want it. I really want it, not just because it's easier than staying here. Tyler was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. I'm tired, Madison. I'm so tired of being this person, of hurting everyone I love, of disappointing Connor. Then let's get you help. What if it doesn't work? What if I'm too far gone? I thought about Grandpa Joe's letter, about his faith in second chances and the possibility of redemption. Then we'll figure out what comes next, but at least we'll have tried. The paperwork took another week. During that time, I threw myself into learning about property management. I visited each of Grandpa Joe's buildings, met with the tenants, and reviewed maintenance schedules. It was overwhelming, but also oddly satisfying. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was building something rather than just getting by. The duplex near the university housed 4 graduate students who kept the place immaculate and paid rent early every month. The downtown commercial building was anchored by Bookmark Cafe and Turning Pages Books, both run by a married couple who'd been there for 6 years. Your grandfather was the best landlord we ever had, the wife Elena told me. Fair rent, quick repairs, never bothered us unless something was wrong. Are you planning to keep things the same? I'm planning to try, I said, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. The vacant lot was in a neighborhood that had gentrified significantly since Grandpa Joe bought it. Real estate agents called constantly with offers to buy, each one higher than the last. But something held me back from selling. Maybe it was the memory of his careful planning, his long-term thinking. Connor was adjusting better than I expected. His teacher reported that he was making friends and his grades were improving. At home, he'd started talking more, asking questions about his parents and when they might come home. Aunt Madison, when Dad gets out of the treatment place, can we all live together?
It was a question I'd been dreading. I don't know, buddy. We'll have to see how things go. But no matter what happens, you'll always have a home with me. He nodded solemnly, seeming to understand more than an 8-year-old should have to. One evening, as I was reviewing tenant applications for a unit that was opening up, my phone rang. It was Tyler, calling from the treatment center. Madison, I just wanted to say thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. How's it going? Hard. Harder than I thought it would be. But good hard, you know? Like I'm finally doing something right for once. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet apartment with Connor asleep in his room and a stack of business documents spread across my table. 6 weeks ago, I'd been a struggling single woman with no family and no future. Now I was a guardian, a business owner, and the keeper of my grandfather's legacy. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely beyond anything I'd imagined for myself. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. 3 months into Tyler's treatment, I discovered I had a talent I never knew existed. It started small, noticing that the coffee shop in my commercial building could increase foot traffic with better window displays, suggesting to the bookstore owner that hosting evening poetry readings might draw new customers. Small observations that somehow made a difference. You have an eye for this, said Marcus Chen, the property management company supervisor who'd worked with Grandpa Joe for years. Your grandfather had the same instinct. He could walk into a space and see possibilities others missed. I was standing in the vacant lot downtown, watching construction crews work on a luxury apartment complex across the street. The neighborhood had transformed dramatically in just the past year. Coffee shops where dive bars used to be, art galleries replacing check cashing stores. What do you think he planned to do with this land? I asked Marcus. He shrugged. He never said. Just told me to hold on to it, that it would be important someday. Knowing Joe, he probably had a 20-year plan we haven't figured out yet. That afternoon, I stopped by Connor's school for his parent-teacher conference. Mrs. Martinez, his third-grade teacher, had requested a meeting to discuss his progress. Connor's doing remarkably well, considering everything he's been through, she said, pulling out his portfolio. His math scores have improved dramatically, and he's showing real leadership qualities with the other students. She showed me his recent assignments, including a story he'd written about a boy who helped his aunt take care of buildings. The illustration showed stick figures labeled Aunt Madison and Connor standing in front of what was clearly meant to be the duplex. "He talks about you a lot," Mrs. Martinez continued, "about the work you do, the people you help. You're having a positive impact on him." Walking home from the school, Connor chattering about his day, I felt something shift inside me. For months, I'd been focused on simply surviving each challenge as it came. But somewhere along the way, I'd stopped just surviving and started building something. That evening, while Connor worked on homework at the kitchen table, I sketched out ideas for the vacant lot. What if it wasn't just about selling to the highest bidder? What if there was a way to honor Grandpa Joe's vision while serving the community? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hi, Madison. This is Derek Castellanos from Portland Community Development. I got your number from Elena at Bookmark Cafe. I'd love to discuss a potential project with you. Are you free for coffee this week?" I'd never heard of Derek Castellanos, but Elena wouldn't have given out my number without good reason. I texted back agreeing to meet. 2 days later, I sat across from Derek at a small cafe near the university. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 30s, with paint-stained fingers and intense brown eyes that lit up when he talked about urban planning. "Elena mentioned you own the vacant lot on 5th Street, he said after we'd ordered. "I've been watching that property for months, hoping whoever owned it would be open to something other than another luxury development." "What did you have in mind?" Derek pulled out a tablet and showed me renderings of what looked like a small village. Mixed-use development, affordable housing on top, community spaces below. A place for local artists to live and work, with gallery space that connects to the street. Not luxury, but beautiful, functional, something that serves the people who actually live in this neighborhood. I studied the drawings. The design was elegant, but not pretentious. Modern, but warm. It looked like the kind of place where Connor could grow up feeling connected to his community. "This would cost millions to build," I said. "Not millions. And there are grants available for affordable housing projects, community development funds. I've put together proposals like this before. The challenge is always finding landowners who care more about community impact than maximum profit." I thought about Grandpa Joe's letter, about using the inheritance wisely and helping where I could. Why do you think I'd be interested? Derek smiled. "Because Elena told me you're the kind of person who remembers tenants' birthdays and personally checks on maintenance requests. Because you're raising your nephew and understand what families need. Because you inherited property from someone who clearly cared more about people than profit." That night, I called Mom to discuss Derek's proposal. She'd been recovering well from her heart episode, and our weekly phone calls had become a highlight of both our weeks. "It sounds like something your grandfather would approve of," she said after I explained the project. "But Madison, you don't have to save the world. You're already doing so much." "I know, but what if I could do both? Make smart business decisions and help people at the same time?" "Then you'd be just like him. Your grandfather always said the best investments were the ones that made the community stronger." Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into research. I read about affordable housing development, community land trusts, and sustainable urban planning. I attended city council meetings and neighborhood associations. I discovered a passion for understanding how cities work, how housing policy affects real families. Connor often came with me to these meetings, quietly drawing in a notebook while adults debated zoning laws and tax incentives. One evening, as we walked home from a particularly heated city council session, he surprised me. "Aunt Madison, are you going to build houses for people who don't have enough money?" "Maybe, buddy. What do you think about that?" He considered this seriously. "I think it's good. Before I lived with you, I was scared I wouldn't have anywhere to go. Other kids shouldn't be scared like that." His simple wisdom hit me harder than any policy document or financial projection. This wasn't just about honoring Grandpa Joe's legacy or proving I could handle responsibility. It was about using what I'd been given to make sure other families didn't fall through the cracks. Meanwhile, Tyler's progress in treatment continued to surprise everyone, including himself. During our weekly phone calls, he sounded more like the brother I remembered from childhood, thoughtful, funny, genuinely interested in other people. "The counselors here have us working on making amends," he told me during one call. Not just saying sorry, but actually understanding the impact of our choices on other people. Madison, I never realized how much my addiction hurt Connor, how scared he must have been. He's doing well now, I assured him. But Tyler, when you get out, things are going to be different. I can't just hand Connor back and pretend none of this happened. I know, and I don't want you to. I want to earn the right to be his father again, really earn it. These conversations gave me hope, but also highlighted new challenges. Where would Tyler live when he completed treatment? How would we navigate shared custody of Connor? How could I help Tyler rebuild his life without enabling old patterns? The answers started coming from an unexpected source. Dr. Sarah Kim, Tyler's counselor at Pacific Recovery, called to discuss transition planning. Tyler's made remarkable progress, she said, but recovery doesn't end when residential treatment does. He'll need ongoing support, stable housing, and meaningful work. Family involvement is crucial, but it has to be structured carefully. Dr. Kim suggested a gradual transition plan. Tyler would move to a sober living facility for 6 months after treatment with regular family visits and overnight stays. If he maintained sobriety and engaged consistently with outpatient counseling, we could discuss more permanent arrangements. The goal isn't to test him, she explained. It's to give him the tools and support system he needs to succeed long term. I found myself becoming Tyler's advocate in ways I'd never expected. I researched sober living facilities, attended family therapy sessions via video call, and worked with social services to ensure Connor's needs were prioritized throughout the process. One afternoon, while reviewing applications for a new tenant at the duplex, I had an idea that felt both obvious and revolutionary. What if one of the units could be transitional housing for people leaving treatment programs? Not just Tyler, but others who needed stable, supportive housing during early recovery. I called Derek to discuss the possibility. He was immediately enthusiastic. There's a huge need for that kind of housing, he said. People complete treatment programs and then can't find landlords willing to rent to them. They end up in unstable situations that increase relapse risk. Would that work legally, having transitional housing mixed with regular tenants? Absolutely. There are models for it all over the country. You'd need to partner with recovery organizations, establish clear guidelines, but it's definitely doable. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with Connor coloring beside me, mapping out possibilities. The duplex could house people transitioning from treatment. The commercial building could continue serving the community through the bookstore and cafe. The vacant lot could become affordable housing that strengthened the neighborhood rather than displacing existing residents. And maybe, if everything worked out, Tyler could be one of the success stories that proved the system could work. Aunt Madison, Connor said, looking up from his drawing, are you going to help Dad when he comes back? I'm going to help him help himself, I said carefully. There's a difference. Connor nodded sagely and went back to his coloring. He was drawing our family now, stick figures labeled with everyone's names, including Tyler and Sarah, all standing in front of houses with big windows and bright doors. Looking at his drawing, I realized that somewhere, in the midst of crisis and responsibility and impossible decisions, I'd discovered something I'd never known I wanted: the ability to create stability and opportunity for others. It was a power I'd never imagined having, and one I was just beginning to understand how to use. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing architectural plans for the affordable housing project. The number was one I'd been dreading to see: Pacific Recovery Center. Madison, this is Dr. Kim. I need to speak with you urgently about Tyler. My stomach dropped. After 6 months of steady progress, something had gone wrong. What happened? Is he okay? Physically, he's fine, but there's been a development that requires immediate family decision-making. Can you come down here today? 3 hours later, I sat in Dr. Kim's office while Tyler stared at his hands, looking more defeated than I'd seen him since that first jail visit. Tell her what you told me, Dr. Kim said gently. Tyler's voice was barely above a whisper. The people I owed money to, they found out about the inheritance, about you. Ice formed in my veins. What do you mean they found out? Someone talked. Word gets around in jail, you know, about who has money, who doesn't. They know you own properties now, that you're helping me pay for treatment. Dr. Kim leaned forward. Tyler received a call yesterday.
The caller made it clear they know where Connor goes to school, where you live, what your daily routines are. They want $50,000, Tyler continued, his voice breaking. The original debt plus interest. They said if I don't pay by the end of the week, they'll start with Connor. The room spun. I gripped the arms of my chair, trying to process what I was hearing. So we pay them. I have the money. Madison, no. Tyler looked up, his eyes fierce with desperation. If you pay them once, they'll never stop. They'll bleed you dry. I know these people. I've seen what they do to families who get involved. Dr. Kim nodded grimly. Tyler's right. Paying extortion rarely ends with one payment. But we also can't ignore credible threats against a child. Then what are our options? The FBI has a task force that deals with this kind of organized crime, Dr. Kim said. But building a case takes time, and cooperation from Tyler could put him in significant danger. Tyler laughed bitterly. You think I care about danger to me? Madison, these aren't playground bullies. They're professionals. They know how to hurt people without leaving evidence. They know how to make families disappear. So what are you suggesting? Tyler was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. I need to leave treatment early. Go back to Portland, tell them I'll work off the debt. Keep them focused on me instead of you and Connor. Absolutely not, I said immediately. Tyler, you're 3 weeks away from completing the program. You're finally getting your life together. What life? If something happens to Connor because of my mistakes, I'll never forgive myself. I'll use it anyway. At least this way, he stays safe.
Dr. Kim intervened. There's another option. It's risky, but it might buy us time to work with law enforcement. She explained her idea. Tyler would complete treatment as scheduled, but when he was released, we would stage an elaborate deception. To the outside world, it would appear that Tyler and I had had a falling out. He would publicly move into a halfway house across town, seemingly estranged from his family and without access to my resources. Meanwhile, Dr. Kim continued, he'd actually be living in a secure location we arranged through the FBI program. Madison, you'd need to play the role of the angry sister who cut him off financially, in public, at community meetings, anywhere you might be observed. You want me to pretend I've abandoned him? It's not abandonment if it's to protect him, Tyler said quietly. Madison, it's the only way to keep Connor safe while the FBI builds their case. That night, I sat in Connor's room watching him sleep, trying to figure out how to explain that his father's past had followed us into our new life. How do you tell an 8-year-old that he might be in danger because of debts he doesn't understand? I didn't have to. Connor had been listening at the door when I got the call from Dr. Kim. Aunt Madison? His voice was small in the darkness. Are the bad people going to hurt us? I sat on the edge of his bed, choosing my words carefully. Some people think they can scare us into giving them money, but we have people helping us, and we're going to be very careful for a while. Is Dad coming home? Yes, but it's going to be complicated. We might have to pretend we're mad at him for a while to keep everyone safe. Connor was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, like playing pretend, but serious pretend? Exactly like that. Okay, I can seriously pretend if it helps Dad. The next few weeks were a blur of secret meetings and careful planning. FBI agent Lisa Rodriguez became a regular presence in my life, teaching me about digital security, surveillance awareness, and how to maintain a convincing public persona while cooperating with their investigation. These organizations operate on reputation, she explained. If they believe Tyler has been cut off from family money, they're more likely to negotiate payment plans or alternative arrangements rather than escalate to violence. The hardest part was telling Mom. I drove to Phoenix to explain the situation in person, watching her face cycle through shock, fear, and finally, grim determination. What do you need me to do? She asked. You need to be angry at both of us. In public, if anyone asks, Tyler relapsed and I enabled him. We're estranged, you're disappointed in both your children. Mom's acting skills surprised everyone. At Tyler's graduation ceremony from Pacific Recovery, she played the role of the bitter mother perfectly, making pointed comments about wasted opportunities and family disappointment.
To observers, it looked like a family fracturing under the weight of addiction and financial stress. Tyler moved into what appeared to be a rundown halfway house in East Portland. In reality, it was a safe house run by the FBI with full surveillance and protection. But to anyone watching, he looked like a recovering addict with no family support and no resources. I threw myself into my community development work with renewed intensity, partly because it gave me an outlet for my anxiety, and partly because maintaining my public routine was crucial to the deception. Derek and I spent long hours working on the affordable housing proposal, and our professional relationship began evolving into something more personal. "You seem different lately," he observed one evening as we reviewed construction timelines. "More focused, but also more guarded." I wanted to tell him everything. Derek had become someone I trusted, someone whose opinion mattered to me. But Agent Rodriguez had been clear: the fewer people who knew the truth, the safer everyone would be. "I've just got a lot on my plate," I said, avoiding his eyes. "The properties, Connor, family stuff." "How's your brother doing? I know you mentioned he was in treatment." "We're not really speaking right now," I said, hating how easily the lie came. "He made some choices that... it's complicated." Derek nodded sympathetically, and I felt terrible for deceiving him. But every lie was a brick in the wall, protecting Connor, protecting Tyler, protecting the new life we'd all built. The deception extended to Connor's school. I met with Mrs. Martinez and the principal to explain that Connor's father had relapsed and was no longer part of our lives. They implemented additional security measures, and Connor learned to tell teachers that his dad wasn't coming to school events because he and Aunt Madison had a fight. 2 months into the charade, I was starting to crack under the pressure. Maintaining anger toward Tyler in public while supporting him privately was exhausting. Lying to Derek felt like betraying the trust we'd built. Even Connor was struggling with the constant need to monitor his words and actions. The breaking point came at a city council meeting where I was presenting the affordable housing proposal. A journalist from the local paper asked about my family's commitment to community service, given recent reports about my brother's legal troubles. "Some people are questioning whether someone who can't help their own family should be trusted with public development projects," she said, her tone sharp with implied criticism. I felt every eye in the room on me, felt the weight of the lie I was living. Derek, sitting in the front row, looked confused and hurt. Agent Rodriguez, monitoring from the back of the room, gave me an almost imperceptible nod. "My family's personal struggles don't diminish my commitment to this community," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Sometimes loving someone means making difficult choices. Sometimes helping them means not enabling destructive behavior." The words felt like ashes in my mouth, but they served their purpose. The room murmured approval, the journalist scribbled notes, and somewhere across town, Tyler was safe because everyone believed I'd abandoned him. After the meeting, Derek walked me to my car. "Madison, I had no idea you were dealing with all this alone. Why didn't you tell me about your brother?" "Because it's not your problem," I said, hating myself for the distance I was creating between us. "I thought we were friends, more than friends maybe. Friends share burdens." I looked at him standing under the streetlight, his face open with concern and hurt, and realized that the deception was costing me more than I'd calculated. I was protecting Tyler and Connor, but I was losing Derek. I was losing the possibility of love, of partnership, of building something real with someone who genuinely cared about me. "Derek, I started, then stopped. There were no words that could bridge the gap between truth and safety." "I understand," he said quietly. "You need to take care of your family. But Madison, don't shut everyone out. Not everyone will hurt you."
As he walked away, I sat in my car fighting tears. The woman who'd inherited her grandfather's legacy and built a real estate business was strong, capable, in control. But the woman pretending to hate her brother to save his life was falling apart, one lie at a time. The surveillance photos arrived on a Thursday morning, slipped under my apartment door in a manila envelope with no return address. My hands shook as I spread them across my kitchen table while Connor ate cereal before school. They showed Tyler entering and leaving the FBI safe house, me meeting with Agent Rodriguez at a coffee shop downtown. Derek and I reviewed architectural plans at my apartment, time-stamped from 3 nights ago. Someone had been watching us for weeks, documenting every move, every meeting, every moment of our carefully constructed deception. The note was brief. Your brother's debt just doubled. You have 48 hours. I managed to get Connor off to school without betraying my panic, but the moment his bus disappeared around the corner, I called Agent Rodriguez. They know, I said without preamble. They know everything. An hour later, I sat in an unmarked FBI van parked behind a grocery store, staring at the photos while Agent Rodriguez and her team tried to figure out how the operation had been compromised. These were taken with professional equipment, Rodriguez said, examining the images through a magnifying glass. This isn't some street dealer with a cell phone camera. Someone with resources is behind this. What does that mean for Tyler, for Connor? It means we need to extract Tyler immediately and put both of you in protective custody until we can make arrests. No, the word came out harder than I'd intended. Connor's finally stable. He's got friends, he's doing well in school. I won't uproot his life again. Madison, these people have made credible threats against a child. Your grandfather's money won't protect you if they decide to escalate. I thought about Connor, drawing stick figure families, about his shy smile when his teacher praised his math homework, about the way he'd started calling my apartment home. How could I explain to him that we had to disappear again, that the safety I'd promised him was an illusion? My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Can we talk? Something's not adding up. I showed the message to Rodriguez, who frowned. How much does he know? Nothing. I've kept him completely out of this. Madison, he's been to your apartment multiple times. He's worked closely with you on public projects. If someone's been surveilling you, they know about him too. The implication hit me like a physical blow. By protecting Derek from the truth, I'd made him a target. My lies hadn't just been hurting our relationship, they'd been putting him in danger. I need to warn him, I said. Absolutely not. Any contact with civilians outside the investigation could compromise. He's not just some civilian, I snapped. He's someone I care about, and if something happens to him because I dragged him into this mess without his knowledge, I'll never forgive myself. Rodriguez studied my face for a long moment. You're in love with him. I hadn't said the words out loud before, hadn't even fully admitted them to myself. But sitting in that van, surrounded by surveillance photos and federal agents, the truth felt unavoidable. Yes, I am. Then you need to understand that the best way to protect him is to let us handle this. No contact, no warnings, no heroic gestures. We'll make sure he's safe. But Derek didn't give me a choice. That afternoon, while I was picking Connor up from school, I found him waiting by my car in the parking lot. We need to talk, he said, his expression more serious than I'd ever seen it. Connor ran ahead to play on the playground equipment, giving us a few minutes of privacy. Derek, this isn't a good time. It's never a good time with you lately. His voice carried a frustration I'd never heard before. Madison, I've been patient. I've respected your boundaries, but I can't pretend I don't see what's happening anymore. I don't know what you mean. 3 weeks ago, you told the city council that your brother relapsed and you cut him off. But yesterday, I saw him coming out of the community center where they hold AA meetings. He looked healthy, stable, nothing like someone in active addiction. My mouth went dry. You're mistaken. Am I? Because I also noticed that every time we're in public together, you act like we barely know each other. But when we're alone working on the housing project, you're different, warmer, like the real you. Connor called from the playground, asking for 5 more minutes. I waved at him, buying time I didn't have. Derek, there are things you don't understand, things I can't explain. Try me. I looked at this man who'd believed in my vision for affordable housing, who'd spent countless hours helping me understand zoning laws and construction permits, who'd become the bright spot in months of careful deception. He deserved the truth, but the truth could get him killed. I can't. I'm sorry, but I just can't. Something shifted in Derek's expression. The hurt was still there, but now it was mixed with something else.
disappointment, maybe even disgust. You know what's funny, he said quietly. When we first met, Elena told me you were different, honest, someone who actually cared about people instead of just profit. I guess she was wrong. Derek, please. Whatever game you're playing, whatever you're hiding, I'm done being part of it. The housing project, our partnership, whatever this was between us, consider it over. He walked away without looking back, leaving me standing in a school parking lot, watching my chance at love disappear along with everything else I'd tried to protect. That night, after Connor was asleep, I sat on my fire escape, looking out at the city lights and trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong. My phone rang. Mom. Madison, I just got a call from some man asking about Tyler's treatment costs. He said he was from the insurance company, but something felt off. What kind of questions did he ask? About where Tyler was staying, whether he was still in treatment, whether you were helping with expenses. I told him Tyler was on his own now, that we weren't speaking. But honey, I don't think he believed me. The walls were closing in. They'd contacted Mom, which meant they knew about her heart condition, her vulnerability. They'd been watching Derek, which meant they knew about the one relationship that mattered to me. They had photos of Tyler at the safe house, which meant the FBI's protection was compromised.
I called Agent Rodriguez. We need to end this, I said. Whatever it takes, however much money they want, I'll pay it. Madison, we've been through this. Paying extortion will make them go away, at least temporarily, long enough for you to build a real case without my family as bait. That's not how this works. Then make it work that way, I was shouting now, months of fear and frustration pouring out. I never asked to be part of some federal investigation. I never asked for Tyler's mistakes to put everyone I care about in danger. I just want my nephew to be safe, my mother to be left alone, and the people I've hurt with my lies to forgive me. Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. There's something you need to know. We've identified the organization behind the threats. It's bigger than we initially thought. These aren't just local dealers collecting debts. They're part of a trafficking network that uses debt collection as a front for other activities. What does that mean? It means they don't just want money, Madison. They want to control you, your properties, your development projects, your connections in the community. You've built exactly the kind of legitimate business front they need to launder money and expand operations. The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. The timing of the inheritance revelation, the pressure tactics, the surveillance of my daily life. They didn't want $50,000. They wanted me. So paying them won't end this? Paying them would just be the beginning. The FBI raid happened at dawn on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks later. I watched from my apartment window as agents in tactical gear surrounded the warehouse where Tyler's former associates had been operating their network. Agent Rodriguez had spent those 3 weeks building an airtight case, using my cooperation and Tyler's testimony to map out an organization that stretched across 3 states. The arrests were swift and comprehensive. 18 people taken into custody on charges ranging from drug trafficking to racketeering to extortion. The local news covered it extensively, but my family's role in the investigation was kept confidential. Tyler called me from the FBI field office that afternoon. "It's over," he said, and for the first time in months, his voice carried genuine relief. "They got everyone, Madison, all of them. How do you feel?" Scared, grateful, like I can finally start living instead of just surviving. He paused. "I want to see Connor, not to take him away from you, but just to start being his father again, the right way this time." That evening, Connor and I drove to the transitional housing facility where Tyler would be living for the next 6 months. It was clean and well-maintained, with on-site counseling services and job placement assistance. Nothing like the scary halfway house Connor had imagined. Tyler was waiting on the front steps, and when Connor saw him, he ran without hesitation into his father's arms. Watching them embrace, I felt something tight in my chest finally loosen. "Dad, are you really better now?" Connor asked. "I'm working on being better every day," Tyler said honestly, "and I'm going to keep working on it for the rest of my life." Over the following weeks, we established new routines. Tyler had dinner with us twice a week and took Connor to the park on Saturday mornings. I attended family therapy sessions where we worked through years of hurt and misunderstanding. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. The most difficult conversation was with Mom. She drove up from Phoenix to meet Tyler at the facility, and I watched her face cycle through every emotion as she saw her son truly sober for the first time in years. "I'm sorry I put you in an impossible position," Tyler told her. "I'm sorry you had to choose between protecting me and protecting Madison and Connor." "I'm sorry I chose wrong," Mom replied, her voice thick with tears. "I should have trusted Madison from the beginning." "You were trying to save everyone," I said. "We all were. That's what families do." But there was still one relationship I needed to repair, and it felt like the most impossible one of all. Derek hadn't returned my calls or texts. The affordable housing project had stalled without his expertise, and I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that he was considering taking a job in Seattle. Every day I delayed made it less likely that he'd want to hear my explanation. Finally, Elena from the bookstore intervened. "You're both miserable," she said, cornering me during my weekly property inspection. "He asks about you constantly, and you look like you haven't slept in weeks. Whatever happened between you two, fix it." "It's complicated." "Everything worthwhile is complicated. That's what makes it worthwhile." That afternoon, I drove to Derek's apartment and sat in my car for 20 minutes, rehearsing what I wanted to say. When I finally knocked on his door, he looked surprised, but not entirely unwelcoming. "Madison, I wasn't expecting you." "Can I come in? I need to tell you something. The truth this time." He stepped aside, and I walked into his living room, which was filled with moving boxes. "You're leaving," I said. "Job offer in Seattle. A fresh start seemed like a good idea." I took a deep breath and told him everything. The inheritance, Tyler's addiction and debts, the criminal threats, the FBI investigation, the months of deception designed to protect everyone I cared about. I showed him Agent Rodriguez's business card and the newspaper clippings about the arrests. Derek listened without interrupting, his expression shifting from skepticism to shock to something that might have been understanding. "You couldn't tell me because you were protecting me," he said finally. "I couldn't tell you because I was protecting everyone. But Derek, pushing you away was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. Harder than taking custody of Connor, harder than watching Tyler struggle, harder than lying to my own mother." "Why?" I met his eyes, knowing this was my one chance to tell him how I really felt. "Because somewhere in the middle of all this chaos, I fell in love with you. And the thought of something happening to you because of my family's problems was unbearable." He was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were soft with something I'd almost given up hoping to see. "I fell in love with you too. But Madison, I fell in love with someone who I thought trusted me, who I thought saw me as a partner, not just someone to be protected." "I do see you as a partner. That's why I'm here, telling you the truth, asking you not to leave. The housing project needs you. I need you." "What about the next crisis? What happens when something else goes wrong and you decide I'm safer not knowing about it?" It was a fair question, and I'd been thinking about the answer for weeks. "Then I trust you to help me figure it out, together." Derek stood up and walked to the window, looking out of the city where we'd both chosen to build our lives. "The job in Seattle starts next month," he said. My heart sank. "I understand." "Unless I call them tomorrow and turn it down." I looked at him, hardly daring to hope. "I'm not saying it'll be easy," he continued. "Trust takes time to rebuild. But Madison, what we're trying to create with this housing project, what you've built with your family, what your grandfather started with those properties, it's all about second chances. Maybe we deserve one too." 6 months later, Connor and I stood in the courtyard of the new affordable housing complex, watching residents move into their apartments. The building was beautiful, modern but warm, with community gardens and shared spaces that brought neighbors together instead of isolating them. Tyler lived in one of the transitional units, working as a maintenance supervisor and attending evening college classes to become a certified addiction counselor. He'd been sober for over a year, and his relationship with Connor had transformed from desperate weekend visits to genuine daily partnership in raising a remarkable kid. Derek and I had found our rhythm too. He'd turned down the Seattle job and thrown himself into expanding our community development work. We'd applied for grants to build similar projects in other neighborhoods, always with the goal of strengthening communities rather than displacing them. "You know what your grandfather would say if he could see this?" Mom asked, joining us in the courtyard. She visited Portland regularly now, helping with Connor and serving as the unofficial grandmother to several children in the complex. "What?" "That the best investments are the ones that pay dividends for generations." I looked around at the families unpacking moving trucks, kids playing in the safe courtyard, adults chatting on benches in the evening light. This was what Grandpa Joe had envisioned when he'd carefully built his real estate portfolio. Not just financial security for his family, but the tools to create security for others. Connor ran up to us, his face flushed with excitement. "Aunt Madison, Dad says we can plant tomatoes in the garden like Great-Grandpa Joe used to do." "That sounds perfect, buddy." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the building's windows gold, I felt something I'd never expected to feel again after that terrible phone call from Mom 18 months ago. I felt like I belonged to something bigger than myself. A family that had been broken and healed, a community that had been built with intention and love, a legacy that honored the past while creating hope for the future. Derek slipped his hand into mine, warm and steady and real. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. I thought about all the choices that had led us here. The desperate phone call that had cost me my family, only to give me a different kind of family. The inheritance that had seemed like salvation, but had brought its own dangers. The deception that had nearly cost me love, but had ultimately taught me about truth. "None," I said, and meant it. Because sometimes the worst moments of our lives are just the beginning of the best chapters we never saw coming. Sometimes losing everything is how we learn what we're really capable of building. And sometimes the people who scream, "You're dead to me," are the ones who end up showing us how much life we actually have left to live. Connor tugged on my sleeve. "Aunt Madison, will you help me write a letter to Great-Grandpa Joe? I want to tell him about the houses we built." "Of course, sweetheart. What do you want to say?" He thought about it seriously, the way he approached all important questions. "I want to tell him we kept his promise, and that we're going to keep keeping it." As we walked toward home, the apartment that had become our family's headquarters, the place where broken people had learned to heal together, I realized Connor had found the perfect words. We had kept Grandpa Joe's promise. We were taking care of our family, helping where we could, using what we'd been given to create something lasting and good. And we were just getting started. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.